the serene landscapes of New Zealand, a troubling story has emerged. Behind the doors of the community known for its devotion and discipline, allegations of child abuse have cast a shadow over the Jehovah's Witnesses. Today, we delve into the comprehensive report that uncovers these disturbing claims and examines the impact on victims and their families in the local community.
The Court of Appeal has rejected a bid by the Jehovah's Witnesses to stop the publication of the church being referenced as part of the Abuse and Care inquiry. The much-anticipated report covering abuse in state and faith-based institutional care is due out tomorrow afternoon. Kushla Norman joins us live now. Kia ora, Kushla. What else did the ruling say?
Simon, well, the Jehovah Witnesses, they have ongoing legal action to try and get excluded from the inquiry. Now, that decision, that still sits with the Supreme Court and is yet to be decided. But in the meantime, the religious group has sought to get the publication of part of tomorrow's report concerning it suppressed. Now, the Court of Appeal has said no, this cannot happen because of considerable public interest. The court has also said Jehovah's Witnesses, they were too slow with their application. It was only filed last Friday when they knew that this was coming in June and should have filed something earlier. Now, just a few minutes ago, I received a response from the Jehovah's Witnesses. They say that they have serious concerns about the accuracy of tomorrow's report regarding the group, and so it had no other choice but to resort to legal action.
Tēnā koe, Kushla. Thank you.
I'm gonna make it shine.
Pervasive, horrific, unimaginable.
Make it shine.
The experience of thousands subjected to physical, mental and sexual abuse in care, now formally acknowledged. It took 6 years of inquiry and a lifetime for survivors.
For decades, they told us we made it up. They wouldn't have a bar of us. So this today is historic, and that acknowledgement acknowledges all these people here, all the courageous survivors that have been courageous and strong enough to share their stories and come on board.
New Zealand's largest and most complex royal commission ever held exposes what it called a national disgrace, singling out churches, particularly the Catholic Church. Finding, out of an estimated 655,000 people in care between 1950 and 2019, a third were abused, many more neglected.
I cannot take away your pain, but I can tell you this. Today you are heard and you are believed.
It found violence was common, that Māori were disproportionately abused and subjected to overt and targeted racism. At one institution, staff at the Kimberley Centre took payment from members of the public to rape those in their care.
This is a dark and sorrowful day in New Zealand's history.
The report recommends further inquiry into the unmarked graves at former psychiatric hospitals and the establishment of a specialist police unit dedicated to investigating and prosecuting those responsible.
Over the next few months, Cabinet will consider the findings and the report's 138 recommendations and the 95 redress recommendations from the redress report, and we will make decisions and initial priorities.
It also calls for apologies from the Pope and Archbishop of Canterbury, among other religious bodies. The New Zealand government will deliver an official apology in November.
It's just the start of the journey for many and the start of healing.
Healing, the report finds, cannot conclude until there is redress. Without it, it says this dark chapter will remain a stain on the national character forever. Liz Maddock, SBS World News.
At the heart of this report are the stories of 2,400 survivors, many of whom are here today. To every person who took part, I say thank you for your exceptional strength, your incredible courage, and your confronting honesty. Because of you, we know the truth about the abuse and the trauma that you endured. I cannot take away your pain, but I can tell you this. You are heard and you are believed. Many of your stories are horrific and harrowing. They are painful to read, but not nearly as painful as they were to endure. A number of faith-based schools, institutions and people in positions of authority who you should have been able to trust failed you in the worst possible way. When you tried to speak up, those same people turned a blind eye. They covered it up and they prevented you from seeking justice for far too long.
For too long, across governments, across generations, far too many people have turned their backs on you. The state and its institutions not only allowed this abuse to happen, it then denied you your voice and, worse, covered up the extent of the atrocities that took place. Reading the report, Mr. Speaker, I cannot imagine how it would feel to be told as a child that nobody loves you. And then, for those who were entrusted to care for you, to then set about demonstrating that through their actions. I cannot imagine the trauma, the lifelong trauma that would have inflicted. I was moved by a quote relatively early in the report from one of the survivors. I was always unwanted as a little kid, and now I always think I'm unwanted by other people or my partners. The trauma endures. The trauma doesn't go away.
I just wanted to acknowledge the weight of history and of resilience and the potential for healing that currently exists palpably in this room. Words cannot adequately convey the systemic failures and the injustices perpetuated by the state. But words do matter. They are something to be held accountable to. And so, joining with all of Parliament, let it be clear that we in the Greens are so deeply sorry. Today's apology is long awaited. I want to acknowledge that this morning many survivors told us that they believe that this apology should have happened on their terms and in their turf, not in this institution which has caused so much harm. And I hope that is the government's next step. We can own our history and we can do better. The buck stops here. We either do something or we don't. We either centre the pleas of survivors or we don't. We either tinker or we transform. Now, we here in the Greens can commit wholesale to the foundational recommendation of the report to work in a cross-party manner to establish and to work through the recommendations of the inquiry.
I would just like to take a moment to acknowledge those who are no longer with us. Those who never had a chance to hear their voices heard. Those souls who left this world only knowing the horrors they experienced, the cruelty and the unbearable treatment that they received. As both Minister for Prevention of Family and Sexual Violence and Minister for Children, this report is extremely important. It helps myself and those working within this space now to have a true understanding of how the state and faith-based agencies so badly failed in their basic duty of care and protection. The fact that so many offenders were able to victimise and harm repeatedly for years on end, negatively impacting countless children and their families for generations long past their own lifetimes, is devastating and unacceptable. The ease with which these crimes were committed is horrifying. These perpetrators knew that society was conditioned to not believe young victims. These monsters used their positions of authority both as a weapon and a shield. Children believed that police, government and other adults who were complicit in the abuse due to the stonewalling of their cries for help, and rightly so. We must take a long, hard look at not only the perpetrators, but those who enabled this abuse to continue for so long by choosing to look the other way.
The release of this 3,000-page report, culminating from 6 years of hearing truth and pain, is by no means an end point. It is just the beginning. It has proved to the world beyond any form of doubt the reality of state and church-sanctioned abuse. It also proves that for years, successive governments have spent more time, effort and money trying to hide that reality, to save its own reputation, as opposed to saving the lives of innocent children.
Well, how might we do that? Well, we'll go to Matthew chapter 18 and verse 16, because obviously Christ Jesus established the Christian arrangement. And notice what he said, Matthew 18 and verse 16. He says, "But if he does not listen, take along with you one or two more, so that on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses every matter may be established." So Christ Jesus establishes the fact that there has to be 2 witnesses. Now, it doesn't mean that if there's only 1 witness, that there's no consequences. There might be, depending upon the situation. But the scriptures are very clear. Before a judicial committee can be convened, there has to be a confession or 2 witnesses. So we will never change our scriptural position on that subject.